today.
Okay.
As per usual, we're recording the call. We are recording the call for minutes and not for other purposes. So I hope that's fine with everyone. So, and I'm not sure I said my name is Astrid, in case you're not aware.
Hello, Astrid.
Hi.
Hello, Astrid. I'm Amna from Adri, Sudan.
Nice to meet you, Amna. Nice to have you on the call.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
So our program today is first, we're going to hone in on the earthquake in Turkey-Syria, more on the Syria side than the Turkey side. But that's our first agenda item. And then we hope to have Anna, who's actually based in Gaziantep now, also join, but I'm not sure she will be able to make it this time. But we have the whole team from the cross-border into Syria and the Syria base. So that's our first agenda point. And then we will hear from the Riga team in Nairobi, where Jessica Gorham and Christine Appio just finalized a mission to DRC last week, where they were working on, well, work planning, strategy, donor engagement, and also looking at inclusion and inclusion of male survivors in prevention efforts, or of males in prevention efforts. And then the final part of the formal agenda will be a presentation on the minimum service package by UNICEF. So that's kind of the formal agenda. So I suggest we kick it off already. And so to talk to us about what's happening in Syria now, hopefully we'll have Anna talking more about Turkey also afterwards and the earthquake. I'm happy to present Laura Marchensini. Are you there from the GBV team in the whole of Syria?
Hi. Hi, Astrid.
Hi.
Should I switch on my camera to the presentation? Or for
I think that would be good if you can turn on your camera. And then I think it's Azra who is sharing her screen. So Azra will speak afterwards. She used to be our GBV coordinator in Yemen, and she's now surging in, or not even surge, she was foreseen before the earthquake, but she's working now on the cross-border into Syria from Turkey. And then we have Irena, who is based now or doing a detailed assignment kind of search for in support of Damascus hub for Syria as well. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Laura.
Thank you, Astrid. Yes, as she said, my name is Laura Marchesini. I'm part of the GBV All of Syria coordination team. So I will ask Azra to help me with the PowerPoint. Thank you. So we are going to present some main findings of assessment and give some update on the operational side from the Northwest Syria and Damascus hubs of what is going on there in terms of response, and also challenges that we are facing. Before going into the findings of the assessment, we have received a notification that there will be a donors conference that will be looking into the response to the earthquake in Syria, and it is to be confirmed if the donor conference will be for both Turkey and Syria at the same time or not. The donor conference last minute update that I've got has been probably postponed to the 26th of March, and is probably going to take place in Brussels, but I think that all the information needs to be determined yet, because the previous information was a different date on the 16th in Sweden. But the donors conference, it is co-hosted by the European Union and the Sweden government. I'm saying that because now we are going through an exercise that is looking at how we are measuring the flash update that most of us in this call are already aware of. So the launch of the formal launch of the response to the earthquake has passed through the flash appeal. Sorry, the flash appeal is now requested to have like a framework of monitoring that is called post flash appeal need and requirements, and we are currently working on that to have a framework framework on how we are measuring our effort to respond to the earthquake, and that will be presented in the donors conference. In terms of funding received, there is an update on the relief web that is available for everyone to see how the financial tracking is going on in terms of what we are receiving and gaps in terms of financial requirement. Okay, we are going to present some main findings. We are now really much into assessment from different apps. The findings that we are presenting today are really key findings, but they are not aimed to be presented for any comparison. So Damascus Hub and Northwest Syria Hub, they have used different assessment methodologies, different set of questions in different locations. So we are presenting findings for Damascus and for Northwest, but there is not aim of comparing them. So very briefly, to not take too much time, for the Damascus Hub, we are getting information for this presentation from observational tool that has been developed from the GBV, all of Syria, and the apps, the rapid protection assessment conducted with the lead of the protection and the AoRs. It is based on KII, and a collective shelter rapid assessment that was led by OCHA and UNDAC that was based on perception survey. On the Northwest Syria Hub level, we are considering a capacity assessment coordinated by the GBV AoR, UNFPA participation in a cross-border mission that happened last week, and partners, AoR partners consultation on what is going on in the widows' camps. So we go ahead, Azra, and we start talking about the Damascus finding, the Damascus Hub findings. We see that there are risks that are coming up from other sectors' intervention. It is constantly mentioned how much both shelter and wash facilities are not gender segregated. There is a lack of lighting, and both are exposing both situations are exposing women and girls to the risk of GBV. We start having some report on harassment, unfortunately, on both shelter and toilet connected to shelter. Food also is reported to be insufficient, especially for older women and children, and we are looking closely to that because we know how much that can be linked to the exposure to exploitation. There are started to be some reporting on CA having reporting of people being asked for physical, emotional, and other kind of favor in exchange of services and assistance. There are arrays of negative coping mechanism and reporting on movement restriction for people living in collective shelter. Until now, the restriction of movement has been justified by shelter management, mainly because due to the lack of shelter, there is a kind of concern of leaving the shelter and not having the shelter spot available anymore. So it's kind of a measure they are putting in place to preserve the space for people that has been impacted by the earthquake. But we are looking into that a little bit more with shelter colleagues. So women and girls, in terms of needs, we identified that women and girls are the most in need of specialized services, and the one that are most in need for protection assistance, being the one more exposed to protection issues. There are gaps in service provision for especially older women, women and other people with disabilities, dignity kits, hygiene items, and including painkillers and sanitary pads came up as one of the top 3 priorities of the shelter assessment. Needs for psychosocial support, health and case management services, and indeed, in line with what we have just presented, safe and granted access to food, to wash, to shelter in a safe way. We moved to the key findings for the Northwest Syria. Azra, please. Okay, thank you. No, you moved too much.
Too much energy. after
too much
several days of hard work.
Yeah, okay, here we are. Thank you. So Northwest Syria, findings in terms of risks, GBV risks associated to other sectors are very much similar to what we presented for the Damascus hub. Overcrowded shelter, lack of lighting, lock and gender segregation in wash facilities as well, lighting in camps. And then there are women and girls spaces that unfortunately has been affected by the earthquake in terms of infrastructure, but also staff working as GBV responders that are currently not available because displaced, because injured, or because unfortunately dead. There are medical infrastructure that needs to have further refurbishment. Referral system is functioning, but in some areas is broken. And previous the earthquake, we had already a spread of cholera that is still ongoing, and there is a concern about the lack of sanitation that has been raised by WASH sector, how much this lack of sanitation is actually affecting the increase of infectious disease. There is also a general concern of how much responders in general are going to be able to remain available while losing shelter, not having access to services as the one they had before. So needs that we have identified for the Northwest Syria includes a better inclusion of women and engagement of women when it comes to assessment. There is a general lack of gender-focused assessment. There is still a need for dignity kit, psychosocial support including for responders. Need for cash-based intervention beyond the case management, but also for acute protection needs, and availability of more women and girls spaces, include mobile team. So I have a couple of more findings for Widows Camp. I will definitely ask Azra to complement and to provide more information if some of us present here is not familiar with Widows Camp. Widows Camp existed before the earthquake and are camps that host mainly divorced and widows women and girls as part of a conception where those part of the population have to be somehow marginalized and through those camps in that specific areas. So I'm using this presentation to present a couple of findings because they are related to the earthquake. Since the protection concern and overcrowding was already an issue before the earthquake, now newcomers are joining those widows camps. And it is exposing them even more to GBV and protection concerns. So before leaving and give the floor to Verena from the Damascus Hub, I just would like to mention that despite the fact that this presentation will look at what we are doing operationally at the Damascus Hub and Northwest Hub level, at the whole of Syria level, we are also looking closely how to coordinate with WASH, shelter, NFIs, and foods to identify better measure to identify risk and measure to mitigate the risks identified already. Thank you very much. I leave the floor to Verena and I switch off my camera. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. Okay, yeah, so for the Syria Hub, just a few critical updates on the priority response and capacity also. So the first point that I thought it was important to emphasize is on the scale up of the coordination. This is happening across clusters, of course, but for GBV, we are looking at strengthening at national and sub-national level the support with one national GBV coordinator, which is myself. I just deployed a week ago. It feels like a month, but it's a week ago. And we also have IMO. Yes, we also have an IMO that is supporting remotely for now. We are expecting a more long-term one to also arrive, plus 2 sub-national coordinators that we are expecting to have on board for Aleppo and the coastal area starting next week. And we also just received the overall emergency response field coordinator that will be also based in Aleppo. So the team is growing, and that is definitely based on the increasing needs on the ground. In terms of the priority response for the Damascus hub, first point is on scaling up capacity, especially on case management. As you might have heard from Laura already, the needs are mostly to do with the adaptation of case management between static, mobile, remote, because the situation on the ground is really changing and shifting quickly. Some shelters are closing, some others are being relocated. So there is really a strong need to adjust case management to the evolving context. The second critical need is on risk mitigation. The needs are huge across sector response, and the importance of emphasizing the importance of risk mitigation in shelter, wash, and at distribution points is critical for the GBV subsector, working with the other sectors. There is a critical risk of SEA, as Laura also mentioned already. So in terms of the current response, we have developed a case management summary guidance with the support from the team in Aleppo in particular. And we have supported the case managers to ensure rapid implementation, effective implementation in and out of the shelters. A referral mechanism has been established between the mobile teams and the women and girls safe spaces. So these are the 2 main service delivery models that exist in this area, right? Mobile integrated teams, SRH, GBV, and women and girls safe spaces, which are the static facilities that provide psychosocial support, referrals to medical and other essential services. So the link between the 2 is what we're strengthening at the moment. We have about 32 integrated mobile teams and 8 women and girls safe spaces that are still active after the earthquake. We also have, with the support from UNFPA and the Syrian Commission for Family Affairs and Population, established a GBV helpline, which was not yet available until the earthquake happened. So this has been activated about a week ago, and it's a 24/7 free call. This again is to strengthen the remote case management and referral to the other services. GBV risk mitigation observational tool was adapted. So this is part of the tools that were developed in coordination with the whole of Syria. But we, of course, have had a look at how to adapt it and contextualize to the hub specifically. And it was circulated with the GBV subsector partners, as well as the intersector and OCHA. So it is being utilized as we speak at field level, and we will receive some more detailed feedback on the findings in the next few days. NFI's distribution continues, in particular in the form of dignity kits, and the integrated approach, distribution approach is really critical, again, because in the shelters, overcrowding and issues to do with privacy and confidentiality are really the key concerns. So an integrated approach really is what will allow us to have distribution that does not create any harm, and it's done in a more like confidential manner. In terms of challenges, so the main one that we are now observing, besides all the challenges at shelters level and at WASH level, is the fact that the shelters are closing, and there is quite an extent of relocation. Some of the affected population are moving back to houses or family or friends. So it becomes more difficult to track the needs of those that are moving out of the shelters. So again, looking at the link between mobile, remote, and static service provision and adapting also out of shelters is on our radar for the next few days. Last one is on NFI's distribution. Already I mentioned it. The other sectors are using community volunteers to support with the distribution. And this, of course, has issues to do with their capacity in terms of trainings and awareness on issues to do with GBV, risk mitigation, and SEA. So again, we are sensitizing the intersector team to keep an eye on it and to ensure that ethical principles are always applied when distribution happens. I think that was the last one for me. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Verena. I'm mindful that is Anna also on the call, because I think you've given a very good picture of what's happening inside Syria, but I think Anna was hoping to join. Anna is a regional GBV advisor, normally based in the regional office in Turkey, and I know she's now in Gaziantep. So I'm just wondering, are you online, Anna, as well, to complement from the Turkey side?
Sorry, Astrid, I think that Azra from the Turkey side did not present yet.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
And I'll just add, Astrid, also, I can't see Anna online, and she was going to let me know if she could join. So,
okay. So you'll let her, okay. So you'll send me a WhatsApp if she joins.
I will, yes.
Okay. Then over to you, Azra.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues.
I don't hear you very well. Can you go closer to the mic?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Now is better. Yeah.
Okay.
Please, go ahead.
So yeah, no, I was just saying thank you for this opportunity. It's still a little bit of a chaos, as my colleagues also indicated at the beginning. We are trying to find our way out and find the best way to provide a response to the added crisis caused by earthquake. I'm gonna go, I think, just sort of to revert, what we actually were serving before and doing before the earthquake, and then explain how this earthquake actually impacted and expose, if I can say, fragility of not only GBV, but any humanitarian system. Prior to the earthquake, when I just joined, in essence, a couple of weeks before the earthquake, we were doing traditional GBV service provision through women and girls safe spaces, providing anything from safety to legal aid and awareness and income generating activities and so on. When earthquake hit, at that time we were already facing some crisis with funds, and the AoR was facing risks of closing many of our service points. Including also those that were integrating SRH and GBV service provision. Then when the earthquake hit, I think what's most important to notice is that, well, first of all, we were completely unready, and we had to succumb somehow to the pressures from the outside and separate the new earthquake survivors from people we were serving before. So the caseload that was pre-existing and all the programming that was intended for them were practically, I'm not going to say they were suffering, right? Because everybody, I mean, earthquake didn't choose a person who's gonna get hurt, but the resources we had back then intended for that existing caseload was requested to be redirected to the survivors of earthquake, which was limited. All of that was very, very limited. And we are still very, very rapidly depleting the resources we have. So I think that what strikes me the most about this response is that we are still waiting for the funds. No matter the numbers of appeals, of funding, advocacy requests we've done, slowly by agency, we're getting some funds coming in, but these are drops. So of course, I'm sure that you probably all heard already that UN did not react in time in Northwest Syria. And, we did, we are trying, but this is still quite a difficulty. Additionally, I mean, the strategy, our immediate response was to expand or extend our services to the new caseload. we did that with complete absence of data. That means that in the first week of earthquake, we had no ability to collect information what was going on the ground. Not just because we were lacking our own staff who were running for safety in their own lives and the lives of their families, in literal meaning of that word, but also our partners. So the information management collection of data was completely ruined. We, had slow sort of resumption of networks and connections. Usually, first step was through UNFPA and the implementing partners. But in that time, we realized that many assessments started being activated. And we moved on to what Laura mentioned at the beginning. We actually moved on to the capacity assessment because we wanted to make sure that any other assessment has ready referral pathway, updated referral pathway for the locations where they were approaching, to give at least a little bit of a compliance with ethics of data collection. So, when people go out there, they can actually refer in case of the disclosures and so on. Thanks to the TAIMA, to the whole of Syria team, we managed to develop these tools to guide clusters, to refer cases, even if they're not specialized, the observational tool and so on. I can mention that later on. The assessments, what's very important to notice, it also shown that, we had interagency assessments at the immediate aftermath of earthquake. And no matter our efforts and pressures on different levels, we could not safely collect that data from women. So we could not safely engage with the women. I say we because I can't put fully blame on people who were leading these assessments. We, even if there were known functional women and girls safe spaces, we had no time to make sure that we have engaged female staff in these assessments. So practically it became a mission impossible. No, we couldn't engage them safely, so we decided that it's fine. Let's do the assessment, but make sure that we know that this still does not give any conclusive findings on the needs of women and girls, how they had been impacted with the earthquake. The needs, in essence, what were coming up were just basically increased as they were pre-existing for protection, safety, obviously, for basic needs such as water, food, and shelter. But we also saw the increase of risks of increased risks of violations of in different forms. SCA being one of them. But we also saw that in effort, I'm sorry, this is not validated yet, but we got reported reports of a new form of violation under quotations, and nothing is really new in violation. But we got information that people had been, the families had been torn apart, and some female members were being displaced or relocated for their own safety in widows' camps. Leaving women with disabilities or who were under care and girls who were under care, minor girls, basically separated from their core family. We are still trying to verify this information. I honestly don't know who made such a decision and were leading that, but we'll keep you posted on. Trends are difficult to monitor in general. Mostly what we're saying is just repetitive. The risks from the overcrowded centers. The tents are becoming a priority need also when we speak to female single heads of households. But the anxiety and the trauma that people are going through should probably get us ready for more incidents of violence in their previous most common forms. And as I mentioned, we had our initial strategy was just integrate to ongoing service provision, to ongoing response, but protection cluster is carrying out together with the AoRs. They're carrying out rapid protection analysis. Sorry, for the analysis, I'm forgetting the terminology. Rapid protection analysis, and we are part of it, as I mentioned. And the findings may impact our decision or may require us to adapt our strategy. Maybe we will develop a specific one to responding to GBV. I honestly don't know yet. Another thing is that we move on beyond traditional cash-based interventions to IPA or individual protection assistance, which we are providing, or we are aiming to provide once we get the funds, without case management, meaning targeting most vulnerable women and girls within the affected communities. The criteria being basically heightened risk due to earthquake, but it has to be women, right? So there's no need for opening the case management and so on. This is in essence to answer such needs as finding a safe shelter for the family. We just have no other option. At the same time, we're advocating for increased numbers of dignity kits. We are highlighting the need to winterize them. And even those that we pre-positioned before, we realized that they are too basic and really don't meet only the very basic hygiene needs, personal hygiene needs. So we're trying to winterize them because people left without any sort of clothes or ability to warm up in cold, no? And their homes are completely destroyed. So we're trying to make sure that we have availability of dignity kits as well, because the earthquake disrupted supply lines. So if we only focused our response on NFI or on cash assistance, we could not make sure that women and girls would reach the needed items. Another problem is, another way we are trying to reach out to them is obviously through intensified mobile service provision. We are trying to, again, fortify these mobile teams. In addition to protection staffing, we are trying to add also SRH nurse or professional to that team, so that we can do both protection and health screening and then on safe referrals. I think what's also important to note for what we were not ready and are not ready in time, and I'm sorry, I'm not saying again any of this as critique, but more like hoping to be a lesson learned, is that people are left without any sort of identification. And we are still trying to figure out across clusters how to serve them without identity. And then that means we are coming back to beneficiaries with, forcing them to verify their identity multiple times, depending what service they're trying to approach or what need they're trying to meet, which I really believe that we should have some sort of a guidance that can unite us on that, and we can maybe provide some provisional identification instead in such an emergency situation. And then finally, I really need to highlight the duty of care and self-care. Teams are destroyed from UNFPA, cluster, anywhere, our partners. It's insane that, if I can use that word, the amount of trauma and the amount of work we are trying to achieve. It's difficult, and it's. I mean, I really am grateful for UNFPA immediately responding to reach out to UNFPA colleagues, but our coordination teams are not. Our core coordination teams are not made only of UNFPA, so that left some of our main and crucial members of the team without any support. Luckily, we now reached to the colleagues I managed to meet in our retreat, who agreed to meet our team, the non-UNFPA staff. So hopefully that will change also in future. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azra. When you speak, you really get a better sense of just how complex it is and just how hard. I was also struck by your honest kind of like, it is just chaotic and you have to deal with it. A huge thank you to you and to the others, and recognizing the immense pressure you're under and the stress, and you're here sharing with us. So a big thank you. We have some time for questions and answers. I'm aware that while Anna is not with us, we do have, I want to recognize after all that the huge amount of destruction and lives lost in Turkey. So we have Delia Koksal on the call from the UNHCR operations. If you would like to say a little bit about your perspective from the Turkey side.
Hello, colleagues. Good evening for those in our timeline. Apologies, I'm at home and connecting from my phone right now. From Turkey's side, we are in coordination with our colleague Anna, as you mentioned a couple of times. I'm attending from Ankara as from the national protection sector as the co-chair from the national GBV side. And thank you for convening this meeting. And in the southeast of Turkey, we also have field colleagues that are on a daily basis, trying to provide a response to the situation on the ground. I won't really go into the whole coordination structure because I don't know if it's relevant for the purpose of this call. But at the Ankara level, we are currently very closely following up the national developments in terms of protection service delivery by the national authorities. And also jointly with our colleagues from UNFPA and also from the other UN agencies, trying to coordinate how we can support the national response. Yes, I mean the earthquake obviously hits like a very large population in the country, and which was already like a highly populated in terms of the refugee population, but also like a very high percentage of the Turkish population, and there are like very different needs on the ground, as our colleague Azra mentions. There are still needs in terms of shelter, in terms of access to water and sanitation, and multiple situations are ongoing in terms of access to such basic needs. So maybe this is all I can say in summary. I can't talk much more, but I don't want to really take time. And thank you for giving me the platform, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you look just in the chat, others, we put some information from UNFPA and UNICEF around search. Because I realize in Turkey, you have the whole refugee response, right, with the sectors. And now we're looking at how to make sure that we coordinate in a way where we reach, the new IDP survivors of the earthquake, as well as the refugees. So I think there are discussions ongoing within HCT, but there are clusters that are being set up, I know. So a bigger discussion maybe for later, not for today. I'm seeing April nodding, so I'm wondering if I'm sure there are lots of questions and we always pack our calls too much, but April, if you wanted to say something on the part of OCHA around risk mitigation of the scale ups from your perspective, maybe?
Sure. Thanks. And I was just writing something in the chat, but perhaps I'll just speak to it, and of course, to share that, we're all very grateful for the GBV colleagues for this work. And I guess it seems like, once again, that it's the GBV and gender folks who are really pushing for the prioritization of, women and girls' needs. Because what I'm hearing from other sectors and from other assessments, that we're still not getting sex and age aggregated data, which I find so absurd in this day and age. We're still finding that women are not engaged in the, in the assessments. And, the risk of SCA, we've been flagging as OCHA from day one. And, and certainly we're trying to mobilize for more mitigation of that. But I would really, I would love to hear from colleagues in terms of how can we best mitigate, because we know that with the influx of humanitarian actors and other actors, you know, volunteers who are coming into the response into all of the hubs, that these risks will be really high. And, you know, so I really want to see how can we support in mitigating that. And certainly, you know, I hear the concerns around the resource mobilization. And I think that, you know, we are trying very hard to make sure that we get those resources out there. But just really two broad questions for colleagues who've presented. How do we get the rest of the system? And, you know, I say we as in all of us and you know, the rest of the system, including the UNDAC teams and the OCHRs and all of the other humanitarian responders, to do better on prioritization, because this is what I keep hearing, you know, in all of our calls in OCHR as well, that, you know, we're still not getting that sex and age disaggregated data. And we recognize that, you know, because it is very stressful, it is very chaotic, people are just sending whoever they have on surge. And so some of these things are not getting elevated. So I really want to see how do we as a sector help to really elevate these issues, so that it's not only the gender and GBV people who are constantly pushing for these things, but really appreciate the presentation. So thank you.
Thanks, April. Are there any questions, or Verena, Azra, things you felt you still would like to share? I'm sure there's a lot, but if there's, you know, from our side, I think the plan is when Jennifer comes back and we have our head a little bit over water and understanding, there will be a discussion among the core members where we will focus more on what we can do through our organizations and collectively to support. But if there's any questions from the online now or last minutes clarifications, for me, it's been very, very helpful, and I'm very, very grateful for everything you're doing. No? Shiva, are you online? Or Tema, if you've seen in the chat questions that I missed, this is the time to.
Thanks, Astrid. Yeah, I haven't seen any questions that you've missed, but I do just want to maybe ask, we're working on some advocacy points around the response together with the regional GBV and emergencies working group and colleagues who've spoken on this call. And one of the things we'll be looking at is who are the particular targets within the response, within the different, within OCHR, within clusters, etc., that are the best targets for this. So possibly April, and I don't know if others on the call as well, it might be good to get your thoughts on those targets and the best ways to channel that information. So if that's okay, we may follow up with you on that. Thanks.
And if anyone feels compelled to send something directly to Tema on advocacy based on that, of course, reach out to her directly as well to follow up. Okay.
Astrid, can I answer to April?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. April, thank you very much for raising this point. I don't think I have the right answer 100%. What I can say is that from the Syria side, we had the opportunity to have the SSGs, so the leadership that requested like commitment to leadership of UN agencies and coordination to be accountable for GBV risk mitigation and to include, to make sure that gender, sorry, I'm going to switch on my video, I guess, for this.
Thank you.
So despite the fact that there is a commitment coming from the leadership, we notice that probably there is always a tentative of give the ball to us back as GBV AoR, in the sense that there is a general lack of preparation on what exactly should be done by whom. And it seems that, yes, there is a general commitment, but eventually, if the GBV AoR please could
facilitate it happening.
Set up or develop, no? Which is fine. I mean, I think we are the one that must have probably the resources and capacities to review tools, provide tools, and be there. At the same time, I think that for those missions that have the opportunity to have a leadership that is standing for GBV risk mitigation to be part of the response, then probably we should do more in terms of then how we are measuring what the OCHA team or the coordination team is doing, you know, for example, how we are accountable in this sense, because probably both sides, the coordinator side, but also the OCHA side, the leadership side. So what type of work and activity are we reviewing, you know, because otherwise, as everyone, we are working through action that we have to report against and we have to measure, no? So when it comes to GBV risk mitigation at the leadership level, then there is a lack of measurement, I think, that probably should be thought about, and probably a strategy that should be part of the HRP and should be part of the flap peel in this case. So how we're going to prevent a GBV to happen, no, as a GBV, as a humanitarian responders overall. So and not leave the GBV risk mitigation as last minute measure that we have to take because now donors are looking into GBV happening in other sector, no? So what is the strategy that we are taking as humanitarian responders, as a humanitarian system in one specific country? Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That makes a lot of sense. I think there's also it's more at an abstract level, in Geneva level, we feel sometimes we've been talking about GBV as a non-negotiable at ACT levels and sectors, and it still kind of doesn't seem clear. You know, what does it mean? Who takes what action? Yeah. So lots of improvements that can be made. I'm going to hand over to Jessica Gorham, our Riga in Nairobi, to give us a very quick update on her mission with Christine Appio to DRC, where they were at the capital level and also I think in Goma. Over to you, Jessica. I see you on my screen. You're muted still.
I'm going to have my camera on since I don't have a PowerPoint. You get to look at me the whole time after a full day of work. So let's see how that goes. As Astrid said, Christine Appio and myself, we just returned from a week-long or 8-day mission to the Democratic Republic of Congo. We had a full mission, but I think I'll focus most on donor engagement because that's sometimes a unique aspect to some of our missions, which we think went pretty well. So we had a donor roundtable that we had planned as part of the mission planning process. We had around 15 donors attend, which we felt like was a pretty good attendance. And some of the key points that came out of those discussions, I thought I would share with you, because I think they're also relevant to other contexts as well, in terms of what are donors feeling and how are they processing the work that we do. First, we gave an overview of the context in DRC, and I'm going to provide a few points to you as well, because I think these in some ways are unique, in other ways complementary to other contexts as well. So in DRC, they have 133 actors working in HRP affected communities, and 78% of those are local or national organizations, which is pretty outstanding when we look at some of our other contexts. What's also really interesting to note, and I think something that we can take on as best practice, they have 11 subnational hubs, and every one of those is also co-led by a national partner. And I think the reason I bring these facts up is because this also resonated a lot with donors. And I'll bring up some of their comments in a few minutes, the way those things resonated. I think what is also interesting about DRC that we don't often see in other conflict areas is they have a national database that is run by the government. And there's complexities around that. But over 100,000 survivors accessed services last year. And that's documented in the government-run database. So, which is pretty astounding, considering the numbers, for instance, we get out are in the hundreds in places per quarter in places like Somalia. And we can talk about South Sudan and others. So the fact that those are the people that actually access a service, when we talk about tip of the iceberg, I mean, it just, again, is somewhat overwhelming to sort of picture. Out of those, over 92,000 of those survivors accessed medical care. What's also, I think, distinct and to DRC is in most other contexts, at least in my region, we see that intimate partner violence by far is the most reported type of violence, either through GBV IMS or some other type of monitoring system. And what's interesting in DRC as well is that sexual violence in those provinces most impacted by conflict is still, in terms of numbers, some of the highest reported cases. In places like Kasai that are transitioning, the numbers of intimate partner violence are going up. But we talk a lot about sexual violence in conflict. And again, we're saying we know that those cases exist and we know the stigma around reporting. And DRC, we have a lot of those cases obviously being reported through a national database, which is also, I think, an interesting sort of complexity. So kind of armed with those statistics and facts, we did have a lot of things or challenges that we presented to donors, and I can share that PowerPoint with you, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of them because I think this could also be useful to other partners in other countries. So one of the things that we did highlight was the need to actually strengthen coordination between subcluster members and donors themselves and how we could do that. And what was really interesting, just in the discussions in that room, we had two really great entry points. There's a donor, for instance, there's a donor task team for the health sector. And so some of the challenges we mentioned just in that, you could see quickly being a bit mitigated just right during that day. So I mean, it's pretty amazing in a way, right? And we had really great donors who said, nope, we're going to put you on the agenda next time for that health-related donor group. So I would really recommend leveraging donors in other spaces as well. You mentioned, Astrid, this making GBV a non-negotiable on the HCT. And the DRC is one of the few contexts I've actually seen this in practice. So our GBV coordinator actually sits on the HCT. So out of all other sectors and also within the protection cluster, she is the only one. And so she also presents on a monthly basis on GBV outputs and what's needed. And I think she's also quite strategic because she's also very heavily engaged in AAP and then also PSEA. And so they see her at the HCT as really the focal point for a lot of information dissemination and then also the focal point for gathering as well. So lastly, I just want to also give a shout out to BHA because I sat in many different forums. They co-facilitated or co-hosted the donor forum for us. And then I also then saw them later in the day at the HCT. And I really feel like they're asking the right questions in DRC. And then they're also pushing the agenda forward with the HCT. So it was really the BHA team that was the one who was really promoting and very strongly insisting that the HCT take ownership over things like AAP, which is really closely linked to the same people whom we are impacted by. So lastly, I think for all of us maybe to take away from this, the things donors were interested in was definitely about trends. And I think we can all learn from this, even myself at regional level. They wanted to know why, for instance, IPV is getting higher gaining sort of higher prevalence in the Kasai region, and now sexual violence is gaining, is still prominent in other regions. And so these kind of nuances, they really wanted more narrative around. And in fact, we could provide that. We did in a subtle way during the donor meeting, but when we went back and spoke as a subcluster team, everyone was like, well, we have that information readily available. Maybe we need to do more systematic dissemination of trends to donors so that they understand. And the reason is they go back to their countries, to congresses or others, depending on the country, and they justify why they're putting money in different places. So that's a key takeaway, I think, for not only in the DRC, but I think for every country that's probably on the line right now. The other one, because we mentioned, and I think this speaks to localization, but it's also the norm and reality for all GBV subclusters probably across the world, is that when you have 78% of local organizations doing all the work, then we need to really think about how we instill institutionalizing capacity building, how we make sure that they have the ability to be accountable, how do they get funding so we don't have to do pass-through funding, so more funds actually go to the services and the survivors who need them most. And so I felt like it was an honest conversation we had about that. And DRC was, again, one of the few countries I felt like donors were ready to accept having a conversation about this and how they could practically sort of, I think we overuse the word empower, but maybe, make sure that these local and national organizations have that capacity so that we're actually, again, right, empowering those that are actually doing all the work. And then third, just this is probably DRC specific, but something we mentioned, but I think is universal to many other contexts, was a lot of discussion around the issue of impunity. Because in DRC, over 100,000 survivors have been identified or accessed a service. I want to make that clear. Those are people who accessed a service at a service point. Still, I mean, the numbers were something like less than 8,000 even attempted to do any kind of legal redress. And that doesn't mean they even went to full adjudication. So huge discrepancies in numbers, and donors, for instance, like ECHO, were really wondering, how do we overcome this? Because this is a huge, huge issue in terms of prevention, in terms of mitigating future risks, all these other types of things. And I think it's a key takeaway. And maybe as a community globally, we need to think more about, because this isn't just distinct to DRC, although I think they're able to showcase with numbers, but I think we can see across so many contexts that that is one that we aren't maybe able to leverage enough. I'll stop there, but if you are interested in learning more about the mission, we certainly did some capacity building. As I said, my colleague Christine as well did capacity building on prevention and preparedness, and also engaging men and boys. And we were really happy to be able to meet with the whole subcluster team, including all of those national partners. So there wasn't a distinction. It wasn't just, say, UNFPA staff or, international staff that were brought in for retreats and other things. It was an assumption that these co-leads, and you can see the way they communicated, that they were presenting on behalf of their provinces, that it wasn't just a nominal role, that I felt like they were fully engaged in the process. So something to learn from, I think, in many ways. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, do let me know. You can reach, I know we have a full next speaker. So if you would like, my email address is my last name, which is goram@unfpa.org. And I'd be happy to share with you the presentation or any other key sort of outcomes that came from that mission. And some of the things I think we're going to take away and also try to expand and as lessons learned or best practice in some of the other countries in our region. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jessica. I just wanted to, you raised the legal redress or impunity. For me, when I'm thinking of it because DRC was part of the call to action pilot. And when I visited in DRC and also in Nigeria, everything around legal advice, but impunity and redress was really what the local actors were championing. And that kind of struck me because I feel at the global level, we speak less about it because it kind of goes into nexus, it's complicated. But in reality, my impression is that when we talk to local actors, it's a huge priority for them. And so maybe that's also something to keep in mind when we move forward with, with that agenda, that we actually listen to what those priorities are as much as our own or more.
And I think, Astrid, another added complexity is that they're able to clearly see or identify many of those survivors who identify with government troops. And how does that adjudicated when many times it gets adjudicated through military courts and others. So that has a whole new complexity when we talk about sexual violence and conflict and having that level of accountability.
I don't know about all the other contexts, but I was also struck by how they actually have a national strategy. So you have the government on board, and then the GBV community has been working on getting the humanitarian into that national response with all the actual local leaders you're talking about. So we look forward to hearing more later. We can share the mission reports later. Thank you, Jessica. We have one final agenda item, and that's, with Kaime Nikbed. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly. I'm sorry, I'm not better prepared. But you are here, and welcome, to present on the IS guidelines of the minimum service package for MHPSS, together with, I don't know, Vanya. I just see you pop on my screen. You're not on my list, but that's great if you are also part. So over to you. Do you have a presentation?
Yes, thank you very much, Astrid. I do. I don't seem to be able to share my screen. I don't know if someone can give me that power.
Yes, I just gave you the rights.
Fantastic. Great. Can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Okay. Thanks so much, Astrid. So my name is Caoimhe Nicavord. It's a very difficult one to pronounce, but don't worry, I don't get offended. So it's the one, you can see the complicated spelling there, but I'll also share my contact details at the end of this for anyone that wants to follow up over email. So I actually work at UNICEF headquarters as part of the Child Protection in Humanitarian Action team. But I'm here with my colleagues Vanya, who I think just waved, Inka Weisbecker, who leads on the MSP from the WHO side. Also my colleague Monica Vega from UNFPA, who also works on this MSP project. And I also wanted to mention Alison Thomas, who has in previous years been very central to this project, particularly working on protection and GBV components. So some of you will have actually met with Alison during the development of the MSP. So I just wanted to start by thanking you so much for having us and for inviting us, and particularly to Jennifer Chase. So thank you to her in absentia. For inviting us, because many of you as members of the GBV AoR have contributed to the development of the minimum service package over the past 3+ years, as individuals, through your agencies, through the GBV AoR and through the MHPSS task team. So we're particularly delighted to finally be able to present to you the finished product, which has been released as an IASC product. So I'm going to hand over to Inka now to give you a bit of background on the MSP, and you'll see various members of the team popping up throughout the presentation. Over to you, Inka.
Yes, thank you, Caoimhe, and hello, everyone, and thank you for having us. I will just quickly let you know a little bit how the MSP came about. Mental health and psychosocial support minimum service package. It's quite a big phrase to say, so we usually just say MSP. And really, in the years before the MSP was developed, there were quite a few conferences and meetings that recognized that there was increased momentum around MHPSS, increased donor interest, more different actors engaging in MHPSS activities. We noticed that what came out of some of the bigger conferences and consultations about how to move MHPSS forward in emergencies was that there was kind of a lack of clear one kind of guidance of what the minimum or priority activity should be. And there was also actually a lot of variation of how MHPSS was understood by different actors across protection, education, health, what people meant when they said MHPSS, and even the language that they used when they coordinated their activities. Also, while actually there are a lot of guidance documents on MHPSS, almost every month we find new guidance documents and new resources coming out on MHPSS. That's great, but it's also has been very confusing for people to know where to find the right resources and how to plan and know what is most up to date. So there also was a need for kind of a one-stop place where all the different resources could be accessed and found and would be up to date, and some even information to just summarize what are the key things to do for this activity, for example. So this is how the MSP project came about. It's been led by WHO and UNICEF in coordination with UNHCR and UNFPA, but the process has been very inclusive and has been organized through the MHPSS ISC reference group and all its members, and we've reached out to many other, of course, also to many sectors, AoRs throughout the process as well. And yeah, I think we can go to the next slide, where you see a brief, do we have time for the video, Quiva? Anyway, that's...
I think we should be able to show it, yeah.
The number of people affected by humanitarian crises is at a record high. Armed conflicts, natural disasters, and public health emergencies like COVID-19 cause widespread suffering and seriously affect people's mental health and psychosocial well-being. Many people affected lose everything they care about: their loved ones, homes and livelihoods, their communities, their sense of place and sense of self. Yet resources for mental health and psychosocial support services are severely lacking. This leaves many people in severe distress and without the care they need. More than 85% of people affected by mental health conditions in humanitarian settings do not receive treatment. Where services do exist, they are often disconnected and inconsistent. Service providers often lack the training and support they need to provide safe and effective services. Humanitarian donors often don't know which MHPSS activities they should fund, and those planning and implementing programs are faced with tough decisions about what to prioritize. The MHPSS Minimum Service Package outlines the minimum MHPSS activities that should be implemented in all emergency settings across health, protection, education, as well as a range of other sectors that contribute directly and indirectly to MHPSS outcomes. The package is based on existing guidelines and extensive consultations with people involved in humanitarian assistance in frontline, regional, and global roles. It is designed to support humanitarian actors too. Improve coordination between different sectors, identify MHPSS program gaps and priorities, provide timely MHPSS programs based on evidence and guidelines, increase funding allocation for MHPSS, improve coverage of MHPSS activities, and ultimately, improve the mental health and psychosocial well-being of people affected by humanitarian crises. With the collaboration from humanitarian actors around the world, the MSP can play a key role in helping people to recover and rebuild their lives after an emergency.
Great, thank you, Quiva. And we can just go to the next slide, where it's basically about who is the MSP for. So we're really trying to reach a lot of people with this, including planners, those who are planning and designing MHPSS programs, coordinators, including, of course, MHPSS technical working groups, but also other coordination groups as well, implementing partners who may already be actually running programs that are in the MSP, but may want to improve them or find additional resources. Technical advisors who are in the position to give guidance on programs can easily go to the MSP website and share the guidance that is there. And of course, donors who do not always have technical knowledgeable technical people in MHPSS. A lot of people are donors might be very generalists or focus on specific sectors. So we want to make it as easy as possible for them to understand what is MHPSS and how does it fit with the different sectors or areas of work. So that is how we hope the MSP can really make the humanitarian response more effective. And now I hand it over to my colleague Vanya. Thank you.
Thank you, Inka. Thank you, Quiva, as well. So now we are going to have a look at what is actually included in the MSP and what it looks like. So the main package consists of 22 activities. Now, it is important to note that no single organization is expected to implement the entire MSP. Rather, relevant organizations must coordinate and work together across sectors, AoRs, to ensure that the MSP activities are implemented and that a comprehensive response is delivered in each geographical area. Now, there is a lot of information in this image, so don't worry about trying to read it right now. But just to give you an overview, you can see that each activity in each row is tagged with colored icons that represent different sectors and AoRs, such as health, protection, including child protection, GBV, education, shelter, etc. So the colorful icons indicate sectors, AoRs, that are typically well placed to actually implement the activity, whereas the dark blue icons indicate sectors and AoRs that have a role to play in supporting the activity. So for example, GBV actors will provide MHPSS to women and girls safe spaces, but camp coordination and camp management actors might facilitate this by providing the space, notifying the community in the camp about when these activities are happening and where they are happening. So going through the next slide, the activities are organized into 4 sections. Each section focuses on a slightly different type of activity, from interagency activities to activities about designing effective programs to the programmatic MHPSS activities. And we will have a closer look and a brief look at these. So the next slide shows you all 22 activities. We will quickly describe the sections now so you can understand the structure of the MSP, but please don't worry about trying to read it all. You can explore them in detail at your own pace. So section 1 on the left-hand side of the slide focus on interagency coordination and assessment for the MHPSS response. So here you will find activities that are particularly relevant to technical working groups, to coordination groups, as they rely on interagency work. And then section 2, just below, lists essential components of all MHPSS programs. So basically, these are activities that any organization engaging in any type of MHPSS activity should be doing. And that is thoughtful program design, developing your M&E systems, your staff well-being systems, and supporting staff competency. And then on the right side of the slide, you will see the biggest section, which is section 3, and it contains the programmatic activities. This is the main body of the MSP, and it covers activities from community-wide messaging, supporting community self-help, right the way up to focused support like psychological interventions. And finally, you also have section 4, which is on the bottom left of the slide. And it contains activities focused on specific settings. So, for example, infectious disease outbreaks, and also MHPSS for people deprived of their liberty. So as I mentioned before, it's important to keep in mind that no single organization is expected to implement the entire MSP. Organizations are to coordinate and work together across sectors AoRs to ensure that the activities are implemented. So moving to the next slide. And apologies for rushing a bit. I'm just being mindful that we're running out of time. So each of those 22 activities that the MSP includes comes with a brief introduction that explains why the activity is important. You will also find a checklist of actions that will help implement the activity safely and effectively. So basically telling you what you would need to do, the steps for implementation. You will then find additional actions for consideration as well that can be prioritized depend on context-specific needs and available resources. And finally, under each activity, you will find lists of key guidelines, standards, and tools that can support program planning and implementation. So how will you use the MSP? We will now show you a very short video tour of the MSP platform so you can see how you can use the MSP and what it looks like.
The MSP platform is available at mhpssmsp.org. You can use the buttons on the top right corner of the page to log in or sign up to access the platform. You can also toggle between different languages. Once you log in, you'll see that the platform has three main sections: the Home tab, the MSP Guide tab, and the All Activities tab. The Home tab provides a brief overview of the package. The MSP Guide provides a more detailed introduction, explaining what the MSP is, why it's needed, how it can be used, and how it was developed. The guide also includes a section on general principles and considerations that are critical to the safe and effective implementation of the MSP. From the guide menu, you can also download a shorter PDF version of the MSP. The All Activities tab lists the 22 MSP activities. From here, you can click on any activity to access a brief introduction to the activity, a checklist of core actions, additional actions for consideration, and a list of relevant guidelines, standards, and tools. Some activities contain additional information, such as key considerations specific to the activity, and lists of recommended training topics for staff implementing the activity. The MSP platform will continue to be updated with translations and user improvements during the piloting phase. All registered users will receive a survey to provide feedback, which will help us to make the platform as useful as possible.
Thank you. So since we made this video, there have been a few updates to the website. Most importantly, you no longer have to log in. Anyone can access the content right away, and you only need to register if you want to save your checklists and gap analysis. We have also added a filter function, so you can go to the list of all activities and use the filter to say, only show the activities relevant to GBV, for example. And we have also added a search bar, which is a quick way to find relevant information. And finally, I just wanted to show you an image of what it looks like as a PDF, which is also available for download through the MSP website. The final version of the MSP is currently available in English, and we are working on updating the French, the Spanish, Ukrainian, Polish, and Hungarian versions. We will soon also have an Arabic version available in PDF and on the website as well. Now, just a last note that the online version is more comprehensive and includes the list of guidelines that I mentioned for each activity, as well as additional resources on public health emergencies, at-risk groups, as well as introductory webinars that will guide you through the MSP. The PDF version was designed to be a little bit shorter, to be more print-friendly, but it has links to all the relevant information that you can find online. And I will now hand it over to Inka, which will briefly take you through the mentioned MSP tools.
Thank you, Vanya. So just briefly, since we don't have that much time, we also have a gap analysis tool that basically on the website you can fill in which MSP activities are implemented, partially implemented, or not implemented at all, and this gives you an idea of where gaps are and where more needs to be done. We also have a costing tool, which is available upon request in Excel. And soon we will post the final version on the website as well. And we're also under development, there's an MND indicator guide consistent with ISC and other guidance, which just gives you some quick information about what indicators you may draw on when you use the MSP. Over.
Okay, so just in summary, how is all this relevant to you is probably the most important question. And this is not an exclusive list, but I'm just going to highlight some of the headlines of different ways in which people are finding the MSP useful in emergencies. So one of the main purposes of the MSP is to help harmonize all the different approaches that are out there and provide a common language for talking about MHPSS and for defining MHPSS activities. So it's designed to be a unifying framework that can help provide clarity around what counts as MHPSS and also what it typically looks like within different sectors and areas of work. So this can help us when we're having conversations across sectors with colleagues in different sectors, but also it makes it a lot easier for donors to engage with us and actually prioritize and fund MHPSS when we're all speaking the same language. Secondly, it can be useful in understanding and communicating about who typically does what when it comes to MHPSS, while also outlining that many activities are actually delivered by multiple sectors. So things like disseminating key messages on MHPSS can be done by any sector. Group activities for child wellbeing are often done in child protection, but more and more in education, whereas things like MHPSS delivered through safe spaces for women and girls are more typically specifically delivered by GBV actors. Thirdly, when planning an interagency response, when you're writing a HRP or ORP or contributing to that process, often this has to be done really quickly. And a lot of the time, the person tasked with drafting these response plans for different sectors are not MHPSS specialists, but they're still expected to include MHPSS. And so the MSP can be a quick, a helpful reference in identifying the language that is typically used to define activities and also in highlighting which activities typically fit under which sectors. Also, similarly, when writing proposals, the MSP can help you easily see what each activity entails and also what budget is needed. So there's a lot of interest in the costing tool for that reason. It also can help you to see where the gaps are for MHPSS within different sectors that you might want to prioritize in your proposals. Similarly, when designing programs, the MSP helps to map out the concrete actions and steps that are needed for initiating activities that haven't been started yet, but also for strengthening existing activities where needed. And it's not just the programmatic activities, but also activities like developing systems for monitoring and evaluation of MHPSS. That's often an area of weakness. Similarly, we've heard earlier on the call the importance of staff well-being and developing systems and concrete mechanisms to actually look after our staff that are implementing often challenging activities. Things that we know are critical but rarely have been mapped out concretely in proposals and are rarely typically have not been well resourced when it comes to MHPSS. So in mapping these out as concrete activities, we're hoping that the MSP can help us to actually dedicate more resources and take these managerial aspects seriously as well. And finally, the MSP can help you to actually find resources on different topics when it comes to MHPSS. So as well as resources associated with each activity, there are also compiled lists of resources for on MHPSS for particular at-risk groups. So for example, where something has been published on MHPSS for children associated with armed forces and armed groups, MHPSS for people with disabilities, for survivors of torture, people living with HIV or AIDS, etc. Those specific resources are all compiled in one place, so you can easily search the MSP to find out what's out there, what exists that can help you when supporting people in different groups. So we're on 4 o'clock on the button. I'll just hand over to Inka very briefly to just run through the next steps for the MSP before we sign off, if that's all right. I don't know, Inka, you're on mute maybe?
Sorry. Yes, so just quickly that with the MHPSS MSP, we are continuing online presentations and webinars, and also still developing additional key materials and tools that people can use for MSP implementation. And also through an ECHO project, we're providing technical support for country level MSP implementation. So don't hesitate to reach us for any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. We are a bit over time, but we still have 37 people online if there are questions. From me, I just would like to say a big thank you. I think it's very, very important. And I think sometimes we don't take MHPSS seriously enough in our work in terms of actual the quality and the importance of it. So huge thank you. Any questions or last minute comments? A thank you from Alice, Mung Wei from Syria, who's coordinating in Syria. Any other? Otherwise, I'll encourage everyone to go into the site and to use the resource and familiarize yourself with it. MHPSS is a huge part of GBV response. Monica, would you like to say something?
Yes, well, I was like Kiva said, but if you have any questions in how to use it as a GBV practitioner, I'm very happy to solve any questions, because I mean, one of the key things is that obviously I've been working a lot with GBV and MHPSS, and I think that this is a great resource precisely for what Kiva was mentioned, standardizing, and I think also what you were saying, in terms of strengthening all the core components that are already in GBV programming. I think the MSP is a great tool to help on that. So if there is any question or anything that people would like to answer, like ask, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like my email is there as a GBV focal point.
Monica just came back not that long ago, back to with UNFPA, and you were part of the whole process. So much appreciated in terms of the GBV perspective. Any other last minute comments? Otherwise, I feel I should release everyone for what is afternoon in Europe and very, very late for those of you in Bangkok or in Asia.
Hi, Astrid.
Hi, Christine. You had a question?
I posted on the chat. Yeah, I'm wondering whether it's user-friendly to like local organizations, particularly women-led women's rights organization that is working on GBV in the field, considering we are seeing an increasing number of local actors in some countries in our region. Thanks.
Sorry, Christine, I didn't see it. So of course, that's Christine talking from Nairobi, from the GBV AoR team there. Monica, do you want to answer? Or I don't know who of you are best placed to answer that question, actually. I'm looking at all of you on my screen.
I'm happy to jump in, and then maybe Monica, you can add. But yeah, that's a great question. It's very important to us to have this as user-friendly as possible. we get mixed feedback. We get a lot of people saying we think it's really user-friendly. We also get people saying we feel we need more support, more hands-on support while we're implementing this for the first time. We did engage human-centered design specialists in helping us design the website to try and make it as user-friendly as possible. And we're also trying to translate it into as many languages as possible. So we did have some women-led organizations, for example, Better World organization in Iraq, which is a local and female-led organization. They were involved with the piloting for more than 1 year, and they would have implemented MHPSS through case management and MHPSS in safe spaces for women and girls using the MSP. So we got some valuable feedback from them. They did seem to find it useful. One of the things they focused on was the staff wellbeing component as well, which is quite nice for us that one of our piloting partners actually selected that one. So the answer is yes, we hope so, and we're doing our best to continue to make it as accessible as possible. But it certainly was developed with local organizations in mind as much as international organizations. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe just to add that it also mentions local organizations throughout the document, including like women's groups and women-led organizations, so that there's an emphasis, even if you're an international, that you don't forget about these as well. Over.
Great. The engagement, it's true. Okay, I think with that, a big thank you to your team as well, and the contributions from UNICEF, WHO, and UNFPA. I think that's it. So a big thank you. Have a great afternoon. You can reach out to me or the REGAT teams if you have other questions for follow-up. And let's keep in touch. Have a good evening, afternoon. Bye.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thanks.